Y'all ready?
The Stripes Live off-season edition. My name is Azigazoot, joined by all the usual suspects. We have Hector Rodriguez, Daniel Rodriguez, Noah Berger, and Alex Carver. We have Eli Sussman behind the scenes. It's December 1st, guys, and we are expecting the new collective bargaining agreement to expire in approximately 5 hours, unfortunately. Both sides have been unable to come to an agreement, as it seems like. Alex, I know you're a little bit more informed than I am at the moment about the CBA. What's the latest on that, man?
Yeah, what's up, guys? Sure we'll have a lot to talk about, so it's going to be a fun one. But, unfortunate for sure. I was just reading up on it. There was just an article that was put out on ESPN by Jeff Passan, and it pretty much says that over these last 3 days where the league and the union were meeting in Texas, that basically nothing happened. You know, the conversations were like 10 minutes long. Today's was 7, and they can't find common ground, mostly on basically economic issues. I mean, I understand, you have to see it from both sides, that the union represents the players and wants to make them the most money possible, and the league has to look out for their own interests and have to make money as well. So not that Major League Baseball is going broke or anything, but after a lost season, they have to look out for themselves. And some of the proposals that are being thrown out are just being completely rejected steadfastly by Major League Baseball. I think one of the most controversial ones per this Passan report is the fact that players want a shorter path to free agency rather than the 3 and 3 that we currently have with the 3 years and then 3 arbitrations. So that appears to be what the major holdup is. And then, there's other, I guess, little issues. Probably, we could talk about DH probably going into it, one side versus the other. And then you could probably talk about stuff like, expanded playoffs. There also wants to be a draft lottery of some kind that I'm hearing about as well. That was reported a couple days ago. So a couple things on the table, and we went into this, Isaac. I didn't really think there was like that huge pressing issue that both sides couldn't meet on. And I really still don't think there is. If there is one, it is the one that I said with free agency. But I think the current system is fair. I mean, like we were just saying off the air, players still get paid if they perform in arbitration. So I think that the union should have some leeway on that one, because if you perform and you're able to play and you prove that you're able to play in your first 3 years, you make money in arbitration. So, and as I said to you guys, most teams, or a lot of teams, I should say, are trying their best to avoid arbitration with most of their players, including the Marlins. So I really don't think that should be an issue. If there is a lockout, which it looks like there will be, I personally don't foresee it to be that strenuously long. But I mean, teams were scrambling here at the last minute to make deals and signings, as we saw in what was very entertaining for me, and I'm sure you guys as well. So maybe there's something to read behind the scenes on that. I'll leave that to your interpretation, but that's just what I see. I just don't see any like huge issues, so I don't think it should be a long lockout.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate. Just after a lost season, a 60-game season, just to have this is just the last thing anyone needs. And you mentioned, the service time. I think service time manipulation is going to be a big thing. I think like those rules, like runners on second base, the DH rule, like you mentioned, are all going to be problems. Hector, what are your thoughts on the CBA? Do you think that the players, have a point in there? Or I think, the league minimum is pretty fair. It's not exactly chump change. And then you, like Alex said, you make money in arbitration. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that exactly.
I just think that, a lot of players just don't want, it's difficult because during the draft process and, you're picked a destination, you don't get the choice of, hey, I want to go play for this organization. And I think all they just want is more control. They just want to have more say in what their career, in their careers. I think if you do one less year of rookie deals, you just do 2 years of league minimum and 3 years of arbitration, I think it's something that the players would agree to, because I think at this point, the way contracts are going, they're more inclined to paying guys during their younger years than their later years. Because before they used to pay guys for what they've done, and now MLB teams are being smarter and paying them for what they should be in the future. And they just, obviously you're better when you're younger, so the players want to get to them, get to free agency at age 27, 28 instead of age 30, 31. And the average age for a major league player to declare for a free agency is 30 years old. And at that point, you might be missing out on some of the money that you would have gotten at age 28, 29.
Right.
Just
Unless
to
you're
ask Hector, just to follow up with that, like I said, I think the 3-3 is completely fair in the system how it is. My question for you, because you mentioned 2 and 3, let's say player plays 2 years. First year for most rookie players, you're not playing a full season. Second, right? For most, I mean, maybe not all, but for most rookie players, you're playing half a year. If you're a pitcher, you're being limited by innings. You're playing as a backup. Whatever it may be. Rare cases. Obviously, there's outliers. Guys come in their first season, win Rookie of the Year. It happens. But for most rookie players, they're limited in their first season. Second season, stay healthy. You play a full season if you're good, right? My question for you is, let's say 2 years passes, players eligible for arbitration. Can teams and can Kangaroo Court and can agents have enough to say that my player deserves this much money because of these, I guess, 1.5 at most for most players, years of what they've done on the field? And can arbiters really rule fairly based off of 1.5 seasons?
I mean, it really just it's on per player basis because it depends on what that certain player does. If he is his first year, he was just kind of like a utility guy, but then he finally earned a starting role and played 140 games the very next year. I'm not an arbitrator, obviously, so I don't know how that process goes into it, but I think that the players are just they want to get to the big contracts. They want to get to their contracts earlier. They want to find a home for themselves because some players are just stuck in an area, in a team that that sometimes isn't very competitive, and they want to play for a team that actually wants to win, and that's a big problem in baseball. The fact that there's a lot of teams that just plain simply are not going for it. They're not making the effort to win, and there's some players, unless you are worthy, there are just some teams that just won't trade you. And I think they just want to have more control in their careers, and the MLBPA is going to do whatever it takes to try to, take less control away from the front offices and give the players more control of, what happens in their future.
Right. I guess my point of view is just coming from the side of the owners. They don't want to give up money because we see it all the time. And we can point to many examples of guys that have a hot start to their career. And then, by year 3 or 4, they fizzle out. So it happens. League adjusts to these guys that were great minor league players and maybe good in their first year or year and a half. And then they fizzle out. And owners don't want to give up money to a guy that they don't feel is proven. So I think it's a stretch to ask, arbiters to rule fairly based off of, in most cases, a season and a half or less. So that's why I said I think the 3-3 is a fair system. I really don't think the union should be pushing too hard for that. And if that's the main issue, I think that's a mistake on behalf of the union because it's going to be a hard get to ask the league to do.
Yeah, no, I'd tend to agree with you there on Alex and with that, Alex. Just because of this CBA, there's been a flurry of moves all around Major League Baseball, and the Marlins are no exception here. They have today introduced Avisail Garcia, and they have also officially announced the extension of Sandy Alcantara. The first guy I want to talk about is Avisail Garcia, the right fielder for now, apparently. He is going to be here for 4 years, $53 million, a $5 million buyout, and also a club option for a 5th year. Daniel, what is your thought on Avisail Garcia finally being introduced? He's a Marlin. He's going to be hitting in the top half of the order for at least the next 3-4 years. There you see Sandy Alcantara presenting Garcia with Jesus Aguilar's number 24. With all these, these plethora of left-handed power bats and Jazz and Jesus and Lewin, it's nice to have a nice right-handed power hitter in the middle of your lineup. What are your thoughts on Mr. Garcia playing with Miami?
I like it. I like the move. I think the only question is going to be how he plays in the outfield. But, offensively, he's going to bring it. He's a good hitter. He has around, I think he had 29 home runs last year. If he can get 20, 21, 22, especially hitting in Lone Depot Park, I think it's a great signing. You look at his contract, it's about $12 million per year, which is about, pretty good for a guy of his skill set, being able to hit the ball. The only problem is that he strikes out quite a bit, and that would be the one issue that I would really have with it. But if he could just bring that down a little bit, hopefully increase the walks, and he should be probably in the middle of the order, maybe around 5 is maybe what I would put him around there. I don't know if you want to put him right there at 4, but it really just depends, somewhere at 4, 5, 6. But I think it's a great signing. I do see the Marlins making another offensive signing, but for Avisail Garcia, I think it's a really great move, and it's really going to help, help this team hitting wise and power, home runs, because that's the one thing the Marlins are lacking. They don't need pitching, especially starters. What they really need to focus on is offensively and hitting the ball. It just, has a check right above it, right next to it.
And we've been speaking about him almost every single stream. If it wasn't a Castellanos, if it wasn't a Buxton, if it wasn't that top tier outfielder, Garcia was about like the best of that second tier of guys. And they went out and they got him. They paid money for him. Noah, there's been reports that, hey, a lot of the center field options are gone. Starling Marte is gone. Byron Buxton has extended. So if Miami were to get another outfielder, which Derek Jeter said they want to, not necessarily a center fielder, Garcia would be getting a bulk of playing time in center. Is that something you're for, or is that just a sketchy defensive outfield?
You know how I am. I love certain players. I'd be interested to see Avisail Garcia in center field if they don't get anybody else. I do think he'd play better in right field, although I'd rather Jesus Sanchez in right field.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Sanchez in left field kind of scares me, really scares me. If all else fails, and I get my wish, Brian De La Cruz will play one of those positions, and I trust him in center field. Can Avisail Garcia play left field? I don't know. It's a lot remains to be seen about what's going to happen here. It's going to be weird. That's one thing I do know is it's going to be weird.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think from what Danny Alvarez has told me, Garcia will be playing right field for the time being. That's where he's slotted in right now. If Miami goes no further, your boy De La Cruz will be getting a bulk of the playing time in center field. But what Craig Mish told us, that doesn't seem likely. He'll likely be slotted in as the fourth outfielder, which I think is his best role. Alex, I know you made a lot of comments about his defense. How do you feel about him possibly playing 140, 150 games in center field at that big Lone Depot Park?
The consensus seems to be that he'll be fine doing it, but if you want to go by numbers and defensive runs saved, that's a big number that I look at. I also look at defensive WAR, but just looking at defensive runs saved last year, he was terrible in center field, but really good in the corners. So, I think you got to put a guy where he has his best value, especially if you're paying him this much money. So, I want to see him playing in the corners. That's where he's most effective. That's where he can serve the team the best. If he has to play center field on a pinch, I think he can do it. He can fake it. He can do enough to get by, or at least he could in Milwaukee. I think you're playing with a much different animal at one of the biggest stadiums in Major League Baseball. So it's tough. If they don't sign a center fielder, you're probably looking at that, honestly. You're probably looking at a lot of him in center field. So I wouldn't want to see a full season of him advantageously. If it had to be that way, I think his power does enough for him that, he can get away with it. But it would be a tough watch to watch him, I think, treading in center field. Not that he's the slowest guy ever, but just because there's a lot of ground, there's a lot of ground to cover with both your arm and your legs. And, routes are tricky. The lights at Lone Depot are tricky. We've heard that before. Roof open, roof closed. You got to battle with that too. So it's a different situation, right, than just playing, I guess, indoors at Milwaukee, which is a smaller field. So that's what I battle with in this conversation. I don't particularly like the idea of a full season of him out there, but if it had to be that way, if it absolutely had to be that way, I guess we have no other choice.
Yeah, and this is a team that's starting for offense. If they are leading that way, they're definitely sacrificing some defense for some offense, because then you're going to have 3 offensive-oriented players in the outfield. But I'm with you. He does have that arm strength to play center field, I think, and he does have the sprint speed, according to StatCast, to maybe, just fake it out there for a little bit. I'm with you, though. I'd prefer to see him in right field and have Jesus just work all spring training long and left. As you guys can see on the screen, Sandy Alcantara's official contract was officially announced. It's a 5-year contract for $56 million, a 6th-year option as well for $21 million. Hector, you weren't here on our Sandy celebration episode. What are your thoughts on the ace sticking with Miami for a long time?
Oh, that should have been the number one priority for the Marlins heading into this offseason, and they did a great job of it. They were able to get Sandy. They got him on a team-friendly deal. He is, he's on his way to becoming one of the best pitchers in the game. He showed up this season, 200 innings, 200 strikeouts. I mean, he's been incredibly impressive, and he pitched really. I think we really started to see Sandy grow to be that number one in heading into the postseason of 2020 when he that Yankee series. They
Yeah.
asked him like, hey, the Yankees have a pretty good offense. He's like, yeah, but they haven't seen me yet. Like that was, that really started. He started to just grow some confidence, believe in himself, and believe in his stuff. I mean, I think he's always believed in his stuff, but I think he really, he wasn't backing down to anybody. Hey, Eli showed up. What's up, Eli?
What's up, everybody?
Backwards
Yeah.
hat too.
Yep.
Behind the scenes, I was switching from one computer to the other, and that's why you lost all the contract. I would spend a while putting together those tweets and aligning them in the right way. Now I can't pull them back up, but at least you get to see my face on the screen for most of the show, so that's a victory in itself.
It's good to have Eli Sussman back, and yeah, I'm with you, Hector. Sandy just really, pitched enough to earn that contract, and you just look at what all these other starting pitchers are getting, and Jose Berrios and Eduardo Rodriguez, what they're receiving in the free agent market. See what Sandy's gonna be making in his free agent years at 17 million, I believe it was. That seems like a great team-friendly deal. Daniel, I know we're all big fans of Sandy Alcantara. How happy are you that he's gonna be here for a very long time?
I love it. When you hear mainstream media telling you this is probably the best deal so far this offseason, especially one of the most underrated pitchers in baseball, I think it's probably one of the best deals Marlins done in a long time. That amount of years plus a club option for under $60 million, that's just incredible. He could have probably gotten double, even triple that, in an open market situation. And just to get someone like that, and especially someone who wants to be here, which really can't be said for, the last couple of years with the Marlins, that someone really wants to be here and not here, for a long time, like Sandy does. I love it because he's really great for, for the fan, the community, the players, the front management. I think it's great. I think it's a great deal, and it's great when you have a player that wants to be here.
Yeah, and something I'm really excited about is that Sandy will be pitching to a new catcher this year, and a really defensive-oriented catcher. The Marlins acquired Jacob Stallings from the Pittsburgh Pirates in exchange for Connor Scott, Kyle Nicholas, and Zach Thompson. Thompson had a lot of major league experience this year, pitched pretty well, had a great cutter. Connor Scott, the first ever draft pick selected by Gary Denbo and Derek Jeter in that regime, and Kyle Nicholas, who was a 2020 draft pick. That one is the one that might come back and hurt the Marlins at most, but hey, they needed catching more than any other team in Major League Baseball. Noah, how was that trade in your eyes?
I love it. I didn't like giving up Zach Thompson, Kyle Nicholas, and Connor Scott, but I think the return is worth it. Jacob Stallings is definitely going to help us out. We need a good backstop. Not really much in the hitting side, but he's a catcher. What are you going to do? I'm very excited about this. He seems to be all in with us here.
Yeah, and he had a great media session yesterday, and he's an absolute god. Very nice guy, obviously well respected in Pittsburgh. Eli, I asked you this earlier about, just 3 years of Stallings versus maybe Mitch Garver's situation or Wilson Contreras, 1 year of him. Was this the best case scenario for a catcher for Miami?
I think all things considered, it kind of hinges on what they do around it. Like in a vacuum, no one individual move is can't really grade it on its own. I mean, the obvious advantage with Stallings compared to Garver, especially compared to Contreras, is that it's a lower salary for this year. It's extra years of control beyond this year. And also, I mean, defensively, I think you have to say that he is the best they could have possibly got out there from everything that he does. That streak of 0 passed balls that dates back like almost 2 calendar years at this point. Crazy. But also just all the intangibles that he does as well, that it brings to the table, those really innate things that you know it when somebody has it, and then you know it when somebody does not have it, when somebody like Alfaro does not have it, and pitchers kind of directly or indirectly kind of hint at it, but still perform anyway. And so, I mean, it's such an exciting proposition that the rotation was performing as well as it was with the catchers they were throwing to the past couple of years, and now they get somebody like Stallings coming in. To me, the fact that it was such a low bar to clear in terms of getting better at catcher, that even though Stallings is a limited player offensively for sure, I mean, there's no way around that he I'd be surprised if he hits more than 5 home runs in a full season playing half his games at Lone Depot. There's just not a whole lot of impact in that bat, not a lot of upside. The more interesting aspect of this is what they gave up to get him, which in my opinion, I thought it was extremely reasonable what they gave up to get him. In terms of the individual players that they gave up in that package, I know Alex and I, we have some diverging views on exactly the composition of this package going to Pittsburgh. I guess that's a good time just to get your Connor Scott thoughts, Alex, because you've been putting them out there in a variety of forms. The very first draft pick under this administration back in 2018, their first round pick. So he's out the door despite the momentum he had going into this offseason. What are your mixed emotions seeing him no longer with the organization?
So to get it out of the way first, I'm fine with the trade. I think it's fair. I think it's good. I think the Marlins got a stud, a late developing stud, I might add, in Jacob Stallings, who had a horrible minor league career. And as you pointed out, Eli was actually passed through waivers, I think, twice.
Yeah.
So,
Nobody wanted him just a few years ago.
Nobody cared. He was 29 years old, and he had played at the majors briefly and then was just getting swapped back and forth on and off the roster, like a lot of guys that the Marlins did this year with prospects that I thought could have been good. But this guy Stallings came back, a couple years ago and became the starter, bona fide starter. Defense was out of this world and just did tons for not a good team and a team that's still rebuilding. So, it's a guy that they probably their highest valued guy that they had to deal to get some prospects. And I think they got some good ones. The main one, as Isaac alluded to, I think that could come back and be like, oh, why did we trade that guy over Connor? And I do like Connor, and I'll get to him because you asked about him. But Kyle Nicholas, per reports that I read on Twitter today, per Pirates media, they are still going to stick to him as a starter, which is encouraging. I definitely think he could stick. Needs to work out a couple things. I would say definitely has a velocity. Velocity doesn't always stick through his starts. I saw him work into the 5th and 6th inning, and he's going from 97 down to 93. So I think you got to clean that up. Fastball's mostly straight. I think not a ton of movement on his fastball that I saw. Does have a really good breaking pitch, though. One really good breaking pitch. And the makings of a second pitch, which I thought could have been addressed well by, Marlins coaches at the higher levels, such as Mel and guys that are directly under him when he got to that level. I also liked some of their most of their pitching development staff in the higher levels of the minors. So I think he could stick. I think he could have stuck as a Marlin. I think he could stick as a Pirate. If not, he's very high floor as a high leverage bullpen guy. Anyways, Connor, since you asked about Connor, I mean, to put it in meme format, people forget this, right? He's still 22 years old and just turned 22 years old less than 2 months ago. Was still playing against competition that I believe was he was younger than the league average competition in single A advanced. Was drafted so young in high school. You know that, Eli. And I mean, I can give you stats on it. I definitely will. I really loved what I saw from him in spring training, just going all the way back there on the backfields. Came back looking so much stronger, so much bigger than he was as this lanky little kid. I thought he put on at least like 30 pounds. Swing looked so much better. I still think he has some simplification to do with his swing for sure. And I think the Pirates can work that out. But again, 22 years old, and he went through an injury this year, and it hampered him for much of his first half. He missed a lot of time. He was kind of back and forth. They were putting him in for one game, taking him out, putting him in because they didn't want to risk it. I think it was a foot injury, if I'm not mistaken. And then he gets in there full go in the second half. And since the month of July, he hits 292, 331, 485 with a 119 WRC plus. So pretty good for a guy playing under his league average age and a guy that was missing time with injury on top of the missed 2020 season. So again, they have to deal from depth. They definitely had to deal with outfield. You saw it with this one. You saw it with Meisner. But a guy that I think could definitely have a successful major league career. It's challenged to Double-A next year, which I think he probably could. The Pirates have a lot of outfielders that they have kind of on the verge with Swaggerty, Mitchell, other guys like that. That are younger guys. I liken Connor to exactly like Calvin Mitchell. I said this to you guys the other day. It's like exactly built like him, lefty hitter, same build. So I think maybe they could get together and corroborate and swap some ideas on hitting. I think that would be good for Connor. But yeah, I'm still high on Connor, man. I like him. First round pick. I don't give up on guys like that. And I think Connor could have a really good future in any organization. And now he goes to a much smaller ballpark with the home club in Pittsburgh. So I like Connor, man. And I think he's going to be good.
Yeah, he was definitely tough to get rid of. Like you said, he was the first ever picked by this regime. Stallings, hey, I think he was worth a while for 3 years of him. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, Stallings comes in, Alfaro was traded actually to San Diego for a player to be named later, along with cash. I personally don't know how they were able to. I think it had all to do with Francisco Cervelli being the new catching coach over there. I think Danielle.
It's gonna be a bag of baseballs coming the other way.
Yeah, we can't expect much in return, but hey, the Marlins were able to get something, if not just cash. I think it was definitely worth it. And unfortunately, Lewis Brinson was designated for assignment as well. I think that's a big one. Hector, I know we've all been, critical of Lewis Brinson for a long time, but nicest guy in the world. Every media session with class, tried his best. He had a great couple week stretch here in 2021. Unfortunately, just sort of fell flat again. So he's designated for assignment. Your thoughts on the Coral Springs product no longer with the organization?
Yeah. Yeah. First things first, just wishing Lewis Brinson well, because, it didn't work out in Miami, but he's a class act. I mean, and it wasn't like he was being lazy and he didn't care. No, he really cared. And I think that might have been what hurt him. How much he wanted to be, that star, and how much pressure he was, because he was the centerpiece of the Yelich trade, But and look, you could see the talent. There's obviously talent with him. I think a big reason why it didn't work out with him in Miami is because of the mental part of baseball. And if you ask, Yogi Berra has a famous quote: 90% of baseball is mental, the other half is physical. And I think Brinson has the physical tools to be an everyday player and a quality everyday player in the major leagues. However, I just think the mental part of baseball really got to him. And you know what? If he could figure that part out somewhere else, and he will get picked up, because I think he's too talented to not, for an organization that might be rebuilding, not just to give him a chance. I think Brinson will do well, and I think he'll go to an organization that is going to treat him well. And honestly, like I said, I think no Marlins fans disliked him. They wanted him to be good. It just didn't end up working out. But I think everyone knows that Brinson is a hell of a dude, and Marlin Nation as a whole just wishes him the best of luck.
Yeah, I actually found it a bit peculiar that he was the one that was designated. Obviously, we knew he probably wasn't going to be on the major league roster next year, but they didn't have to designate him. I thought, like you said, he does have the tools. He has the arm strength. He's a good defensive outfielder. He has the power, which actually came to fruition a little bit this year. But I thought they could have maybe gone the route of designating Isan Diaz. Maybe they have higher hopes.
It's pinching pennies because he's arbitration eligible. They had to get rid of him by the deadline. Otherwise, they're on the hook for he was projected for about $1.3 million by MLB trade rumors, over $1 million, kind of driven by that insanity streak that he had in July and August. Like he was due an actual raise. He was due like twice the league minimum. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even if it's partially guaranteed, you cut him in spring training, they would be on the hook for more money with him than with Isan, who is still not yet arbitration eligible. And I imagine they fielded some sort of like trade. They went through the motions with trade conversations with him prior to that, did their due diligence, see if anybody like Alfaro, Alfaro was going to earn a lot more than even Brinson, but because of the position he played, because he has a little bit more versatility, sure, but at least a little bit more offensive track record in the majors too, when things are right for him. It's understandable why somebody, I guess, I was surprised by Alfaro too, but his value was a little bit higher just because of that. With Brinson, it was all about the money. That's kind of the difference. I've mentioned it, that we've all mentioned it, that there's still a lot of excess. I'm trying to put this politely. There's a lot of guys on the 40-man roster that probably should not be on the 40-man roster in a few months. And so they'll get to those moves probably after the lockout, I guess. But that's why Brinson was gone exactly at this moment. Right.
I know that makes all the sense in the world. And, Alfaro was that next guy who was due for a little bump in arbitration. He was going to be making, I think, a little bit over $2 million. They traded him. They're off the hook for that. Noah, is it, are you satisfied so far? We're going to the lockout. It's 4.5 hours away. Are you satisfied with the 40-man roster, how it's constructed right now?
I'm pretty good with it. I'd rather Isan Diaz not be on it. But I I'm happy with it right now. I think we still need one or two more guys. Maybe a closer would help, but I think we're good for right now going into the lockout.
Yeah, I'm with you, Daniel. With Isan Diaz, I doubt he's gonna be on the major league roster. It's really partially because Joey Wendle was just acquired from Tampa Bay Rays. He is a second baseman, third baseman, shortstop. He was traded for a polarizing prospect in Cameron Meisner, the 35th overall selection in the 2019 draft, right after Blade. He was actually first round talent. He really was. He was supposed to go top 20, top 15, but poor tournament play sort of maybe pushed him back to 35, which was still considered a great selection for Miami at the time. Had decent minor league numbers for the last couple of years, but in the end, he was included in this trade. Daniel, your thoughts on the Wendle for Meisner trade?
I'm just gonna talk about Wendell the player because I'll let Alex go into Cameron Meisner and everything because I know he has a lot to say about that.
We'll do it. We'll do
We're
it.
waiting.
But getting Joey Wendell, I do like it. I think Wendell's a great player, but he's a super utility guy. Even Mangley's going to put him there, third base, second base, shortstop, whatever needed. Mangley does like players who can play multiple positions like Alfaro, but also kind of wanted a Chris Taylor, and this is kind of like Chris Taylor light in Joey Wendell. No batting gloves, which is pretty cool, but I think he's going to do all right. Decent batting average, can hit. I think he's going to do pretty well, especially defensively. The Marlins do need a utility guy. Kind of now what it sees what's going to be with John Birdie if they let him go because of his concussions that happened, in July. But getting Wendell is good, but I don't know about trading Cameron Meisner. I'll let Alex go to it because I'm not really that sure. I do like getting Wendell, but I don't know about giving up that much.
Yeah, I know Eli has a different perspective here. Me personally, I thought, that's a 35th overall selection. Cameron Meisner's a 5-tool player, legitimate, all 5 tools. He has the power. He had an insane run to end his minor league season. And, we've mentioned Meisner might be a trade piece for some point, but you'd think it would be for a larger name than Joey Wendell. Alas, it was for him. Alex, your thoughts on the trade?
Well, first of all, just to give you my brief 40-man thoughts, they need 40-man flexibility at the end of 2022. And obviously a lot can happen before that because they have to add a lot of minor league players and top-tier minor league players like J.J. Bleday, Peyton Burdick, and multiple others to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So the fact that, Isan Diaz is still here, that they're going to get every ounce out of him, because of how he got here. We all know that. As they did with Brinson, and as Eli mentioned, he's now at that point where you're going to have to pay him more money, and the Marlins pinched him out. So they need the 40-man flexibility at the end of the year. So not that you want to field bad players, but you want to have players that you're able to get rid of and not feel bad about it, right? So I think they did a great job in addressing, and we talked about it on this show multiple times. I think they have done a fantastic job in filling out the back end of a roster by bringing in Joey Wendell, who I do like, right? By bringing in smaller minor league signings even, like this guy, Eric Gonzalez. This guy is a fantastic, and I know it's only a minor league deal, but fantastic defender. I put it on Twitter. He's posted a plus defensive WAR in each of his last 5 seasons. Those are guys that you need, right? I mean, past the big names and past the Avisail, Garcias, and past all these other names, you need back-end guys like that can come in and help your bench. And Wendell's one of them. I think Gonzalez, if he gets to the major league team, I think he will. That could be another one. Birdie's sticking around. He still has minor league options, so that's another one. You need reinforcements like that. So it's good to see that they know what they're doing, and it appears that they know what they're doing in fielding guys like that rather than fielding guys like Magneuris Sierra, Jorge Alfaro, Isan Diaz, and sticking to guys like that. So that's good. I'm very glad to see past the big signings that they're making the small signings to fill out the team. I've said too much already on Cam Meisner. I've been getting crap about my viewpoints left and right about this trade. 50% of Marlins Twitter loves it, and the other half hates it. Listen, I love Joey Wendell being added to this team. I think he provides a great service. He plays everywhere. Up until this past season, kept the strikeout rate minimum. I said this also last night on Twitter, that coming into a much bigger park against a new division with a new team to have to learn all new pitchers, I think his strikeout rate could potentially go up. I think he was also somewhat lucky to post the numbers that he did last year with Tampa Bay. I think he was running into his home runs. His StatCast metrics prove it. Near the league bottom in hard hit rate, near the league bottom in exit velocity. He's not a powerful player, but he was running into home runs and somehow cranked out 11, which I don't think you will see that again from a 31-year-old player. Also, he hit 265 with a pretty bad, I think, 320 on base percentage, and his BABIP was at 330, so above average, right? So if the BABIP comes down, which I'm guessing that it will in Lone Depot Park and in other parks of the NL East, even though the numbers look good right now in the NL East, and I can't argue against that, but I think coming back down to earth over the course of his full season here, I think he will be a guy that you'll overlook offensively and prize defensively, and that will be very easy to get into games and clean up some at-bats. That being said, as much as that provides a service to everything that I just said about filling out a roster, and he does lengthen the bench, if we don't have a DH, Don Mattingly, a.k.a. King of the Double Switch, that will be a guy that you will see a lot in that situation. You could see him platooning, as Eli has alluded to. It could happen, and they're going to try to get value out of him because of what they gave up. But what they gave up for him, I agree with you, Isaac. The guy has the potential for all 5 tools. The guy had a 31-game on-base streak in the midst of getting called to Double-A baseball. You can't look at that and say that's nothing. That's just the guy that had a first couple good months. You can't do that. And I know that's probably what Eli's going to say. For me, you cannot do that. Like, you can't just wave that off and say, okay, the guy was just good for 2 months and his strikeout rate's 28%, and it's going to come back to bite him. The guy has a great swing. He talks, he says all the right things. We had him on the podcast. You guys have listened to it. Absolutely fantastic. Plays all 3 outfield positions, knows what he's doing. Even though he's not the fastest guy in the world, what he said to me and Daniel, that if I get to a certain mark on the base pass, I know I'm going to steal the base. You can't find intangibles like that in every single prospect in the minor league system. You just won't do it. So for me, it's a guy that I didn't want to lose. If it's a guy that they had to lose in a bigger deal, a guy that you packaged with other guys for a bigger name, yes. To get back a super utility player at the end of his career or nearing the end of his career, I don't agree. And that's where I'm at. And you guys are all free to form your own opinions and disagree with everything that I just said. It's completely fine. I love the conjecture. I love the discussion with all of you. But that's all I have to say. And I've said much on it already. I just said probably way too much more, but that's where I'm at.
Well, you were right about the podcast appearance. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think he's my favorite play. Alex, of course, he co-hosts the Swimming Upstream podcast for you guys that don't subscribe already. And I think Meisner, no disrespect to the others, but I think that was my favorite interview that you did this year with a prospect.
Thank you.
He was impressive. And he has an understanding for the game that I wasn't familiar with before. I think just, the little signs, he's a good player. So I got to admit, I was a lot less comfortable with this trade than I was with the Stallings trade. In Wendle, I'm a fan of Wendle and his fit with this team. I've laid out those thoughts already on fishstripes.com and on Twitter, so I won't rehash all that Wendle is a good fit, but not as essential as upgrading at catcher as they did with Stallings. And yet, so it's a position that was less critical for them to address, and they give up, in my opinion, Meisner is the prospect that could haunt them more than anybody that they sent to Pittsburgh. Because the fact that everything you said, I believe his ceiling is awesome. He really does have an awesome ceiling. I think our main disagreement is the likelihood of him reaching that ceiling or anything close to it, and that there is still kind of significant bust potential for all he did during the regular season. That's great. I'm not hung up on that on-base streak. If there's one game, like 20 games into that 15 games into that, right in the middle, instead of 30 games, that he reaches base in 15 and then doesn't reach base and then 15 again. I feel like that's one, if not for the streak, I feel like that's a data point that you might feel differently about him. If there was just one off game in the middle of that, I don't think that really sways me one way or the other about him being a trustworthy hitter moving forward. The Arizona Fall League was really a great microcosm of who he is, because he was one of the better power. He was one of the most impressive power hitters in the Fall League among a group of impressive power hitters. The measurables as well on his home runs, his exit velo, really near the top of the chain, even higher than JJ Bleday. He's a guy that his ceiling is higher than JJ Bleday's, just to lay that out for people. For everybody that's excited about Bleday, if Meisner puts it all together, he's going to be the better player, the better all-around player, especially because he could do all this while sticking in center field, potentially. He also struck out in a third of his plate appearances in the fall league against terrible pitchers. The pitching in the fall league was crap. Guys just did not have great stuff relative to the normal year in the fall league. That I think there's just still a lot of questions about him as a hitter and about him being able to make contact against upper level pitching, because right now it's just a little bit of taste of AA, and then there was the fall league as well. And even at high A early in the season, that there is still a lot of swing and miss here. There are still, I feel like you got to see a lot more of him before feeling really confident in him being, a serviceable hitter. And if nothing else, we've seen with other players in this Marlins system that if the hitting is not there, like all the nice things you do in other aspects of the game can't totally make up for that. Like that's the most essential thing for him. Again, sticking in center field is a big difference that he could do compared to like some of these other outfield prospects. That can make a big difference. And you could just watching him play, he really is a very graceful athlete, and he looks the part of a major league center fielder for sure. As I understand the risk, and yeah, I think at the end of the day, there is some agreement between us that this is the deal that you feel less comfortable with compared to everything else that's been going on, because it could go wrong in the long term. It does make them better in the short term. And like that alone, I think that's what the Marlins are prioritizing. Their moves, for the most part, are within the budget that they have available to them. They are making all these moves with the idea of putting together a roster that is complementary and is deeper than it was at any other point these past few years. So you got to applaud them at least for that.
Yeah.
I'll be brief on this, Isaac, just to follow up with Eli's points. I think he makes good points. I think your point about, if he would have, had an off game, then I would have overlooked it. No, I wouldn't have. I would have said, rather than getting on base in 31 straight games, he got on base in 27 of 32, or, whatever it may be. You can't, and while making the jump to AA, and I know it was only maybe, not even a month's worth of games in AA because their season ended early. So yes, you're right. He did have limited time with the Wahoos. You're absolutely right. And I think he'll be back at that level start 2022 with Tampa. Yes. So yeah. And with what that system does with all of their players, I think he's going to the moon. That's my personal opinion. They know how to build players. They know how to build athletes. They wanted Meisner for a reason. And I see the reasons, and I think you see a lot of them as well, right? The only other point that you made that I will mention, just based off of what we asked him on the podcast, which you heard, what he said to me that really stuck out, and I clipped it and posted it on Twitter for those of you that want to listen back to it, is the way that he was able to do what he did along that streak. And he basically said, I just realized what I was doing in my college years and what I was doing previously, it wasn't going to work against major league pitching. And I quickly realized that as the season started. And that's when he started changing stuff up and quickly became the guy that he became. So that's what I look at and say, this is a guy that knows when to admit what I'm doing is not going to work and I need to change something, right? I need to make adjustments and I need to build towards being better, because what I was doing previously, even though I was good in college, it's not going to be good enough here. So that's a heady player. That's baseball IQ. That's intangibles. That's stuff that you want, right? And that's stuff that, for me, sets a prospect apart past K rates, past your batting average, past your on-base streak, stuff like that, to know, you have the mindset to know that I need to do something different in order to succeed. That makes a good baseball player. And I think that Cameron Meisner is good intangibly and tangibly. And I think it's a guy we'll regret giving up in the long term. In the short term, I absolutely agree. Wendle makes the team better right now. And that's what the Marlins could be lauded for on this show, is that they did everything that they could before this lockout, and I'm sure probably after they will as well, to get better right now. And that's something that fans should look at and not sneeze at, because, they're trading quality guys, but they're getting right now quality pieces back. And that's important.
Yeah, and I'm just going to reiterate just quickly both sides of it, because, with, like Eli mentioned many times, and that's huge. When Jazz goes down with an injury or BA goes down with an injury, you're going to have a Joey Wendle who's going to be so big for this major league team. It's all about depth. And the outfield, you're not going to have Eddie Alvarez or, Devin Marrero coming in. Is going to be it's going to be Joey Wendle. It's not going to be Lewis Brinson in center field. It's going to be Brian De La Cruz in center field. So that's like the good part. But I'm with Alex. This one, it's going to sting just, that the 5 tools at the strength that this man has. But at the same time, Eli makes a great point in the sense that Arizona Fall League, he struck out an immense amount. He also hit for an amazing power. So I think, and Craig Mish mentioned this yesterday, that they didn't like go into this offseason looking for Joey Wendle. This trade sort of fell into their lap. And if that were the case, it seems like they could have probably acquired Wendle for a cheaper price. Hector, we haven't heard from you on this trade. I think they probably could have gotten Wendle for someone that's not as, highly touted as Meisner.
Yeah, there's something I wanted to add that Alex said about Meisner and his thought process in college. I will say this, the JJ Bleday Meisner draft was the first draft I actually covered here on Fish Stripes, and he was a guy that was probably going to be a top 15 pick going into the season.
Yeah.
But he fell off boards, and I think one of you was asking, why did he fall off? You weren't sure. What I heard is he struggled against SEC. He struggled in the SEC, which has excellent pitching. You look around college baseball, the best pitching comes from the SEC. Every Friday night guy is a major league arm, and even the Sunday guy is probably going to be, if he's not a major league guy, he's probably going to be a double, triple A guy by the end of his career. And he struggled there, but I watched him because I also covered the Florida Gator baseball program, and I watched Cameron Meisner towards the end of his college career. Florida's game plan was simple. Don't pitch to him. Missouri's offense sucked. Meisner was the only player in that lineup that I think had like big league potential or, higher minor league potential. So I know, and I looked it up. He actually walked a lot against SEC pitching, but they weren't feeding him fastballs because they weren't afraid of the guy behind him. And it was interesting because he wasn't hitting as well. Obviously, most hitters, hit the fastball better than they do against the breaking ball. And he really struggled against SEC pitching because they weren't just grooving in fastballs to hit. They were, mixing it up a little bit more, forcing weak contact. And look, he's actually got pretty decent speed. However, when it comes to him as a base runner, I think it's more he knows how to steal bases rather than pure 60 speed. I think he's just a good base runner.
I'm sorry. Continue.
You're good. But yeah, I mean, we were just talking about the trade. What was the question before?
No, we were just sort of talking about, the volatileness of trading a guy like Meisner, and his SEC struggles. And you're right, like, in that lineup, I remember covering this draft as well, just like taking a quick look, because I remember Jorge Posada, Michael Hill, Derek Jeter, they were all in Vanderbilt watching Bleday, and then they had Meisner there for that second pick. It was a consensus great selection. And just, 2 years later, to get rid of him for a super utility guy, to me, it's interesting, but it's over. It's dealt with. Daniel, your quick thoughts on this trade?
I mean, I have to agree with Alex, but sometimes you're going to have to give to get. And, they gave up Meisner, which I don't think that was the correct prospect to give up. You had guys like Narciso Nunez, Fitterer, guys like that who, you're able to get rid of and, be happy for the future of the franchise. And you're not going to give up someone like Meisner, 5-tool guy. But I think getting Wendle at the moment is good for the Marlins. It will improve them now, especially the utility guy, which the Marlins do like. They do like to play guys in multiple positions. And for Wendle, he'll be a guy with, someone that goes down, they put Wendle up there, whether second base, short, third, and I think he'll thrive. He has been pretty good in Lone Depot Park. We just saw a home run. Anthony Bass, there's an Anthony Bass face after Wendle hit a homer, but I think he'll do good, especially in Lone Depot Park. It's just what they gave up for it, but it's great to see the Marlins actually doing trades and actually improving their major league roster instead of usually being the ones that will trade for multiple prospects. But I think just doing the trade is a positive side for the Marlins.
Yeah, and with you looking at highlights of Joey Wendle, he's just they call him Johnny Forearms over there in Tampa. He's someone that plays the game the right way. He has no batting gloves. You trade Connor Scott, someone that uses no batting gloves. You get one in return. Noah, we really haven't heard from you about this trade. It's an interesting one. What are your thoughts?
So originally I was a little confused. I didn't really know much of Joey Wendle except for him hitting that home run off of Anthony Bass, which still haunts me in my nightmares.
That's all I remember.
I went on to Twitter right when it happened, and I asked Miguel Rojas what he thought. And he actually responded, which made my heart stop. And he pretty much summed it up. He said, "I hate missing out on the potential of Meisner. I think the kid is good and is going to be a great player, but I'm excited about Joey. Been playing against the guy for a long time, and he's a great player. I'm ready for Joey Wendle to help us out this year. I would have loved to have Cameron Meisner in a few years, but right now, Joey Wendle is what helps us right now."
Yeah. I think that's just what Derek Jeter and company are focused on is 2022, which we knew that going in. We didn't expect it to be such a highly touted prospect going the other way for someone of Joey Wendle's ceiling. But no doubt about it, Joey Wendle helped his team in a myriad of ways, coming off the bench, starting when Brian Anderson or Jazz Chisholm are struggling or getting injured, when Miguel Rojas struggling against right-handed pitching. Wendle would be a nice bat, to go against a right-handed pitcher. And also, I don't know if you guys saw his splits home and away. I know Alex showed me other splits, but his splits home and away from Tropicana Field, he was an impeccable hitter almost. But also, his second half, he really did fall off, unfortunately. But that pretty much is all the roster moves we from the last couple of weeks. I don't know if anyone has any other topics that they want to discuss before we call it a night.
Yeah, one more thing actually on the Wendell trade.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny because I think MLB Trade Rumors, their Twitter account, had posted literally like 30 minutes before the trade went down that the Rays were shopping Wendell and Kevin Kiermaier. So, I mean, if they were shopping him, I really think the Marlins really might have oversold, because I am a fan of Cameron Meisner, but I think, the Marlins game plan this offseason was, we got to get better for 2022. Let's not work, we'll worry about 2023 and 2024 when it's time, but 2022 we have to worry about today. And I understand the move, and look, I think it could work out. Joey Wendell's a very good player, and I think he could be an everyday player if, let's say Brian Anderson gets hurt again, or if, just somebody gets, somebody goes on the 10-day IL, Bird, I think he's an upgrade from Birdie. Jesus.
I do such a bad job.
Eli,
to mute
be
myself
professional.
when I crack up. Yeah,
be professional.
I don't know. I'm multitasking. Thank you to Evan Forbes. You've been coming in with the heat in the comments. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And everybody on YouTube. I did a better job promoting the show on our website, and we have a record number of people tuning in on the YouTube channel. So I appreciate everybody coming in here on Lockout Eve. One little point I wanted to mention about Wendell that just occurred to me is that the Marlins very, very quietly the past couple of years have become a very heavy shifting team with their infield. Mm-hmm. So Wendell is a guy that he has extensive experience at second base and shortstop and third base. And some of the highlights that I played with double play was him turning double plays at second base while actually being a third baseman. Like he has not only played all those positions, but he is thoroughly comfortable with being positioned in these weird spots, these totally unorthodox spots, because the Rays, like the Marlins, the Rays were ahead of everybody in terms of doing that, but the Marlins have been a team that have taken a lot of those principles of the way they position their own defenders. And I think that's just one item that he graded out extremely well on these metrics defensively. I believe he was a Gold Glove finalist this year in the AL. He grades out extremely well for how he was handling the shift. The Marlins must be confident that that's going to translate, that there's a lot of common ground between their philosophies in scouting and positioning their infielders. And they must feel that he's going to adapt to that really well. There's a lot of holes you can nitpick about his offense and whether that's going to translate. You guys mentioned how bad he was at Tropicana Field, and you hope that that's going to be solved by a new environment. You don't know. The bottom line is I think he has a really high floor because of the way he plays defense, and that the way that the Marlins do it is actually pretty similar to the way that the Rays do it. It's not going to be that big of a change for him on that front.
Yeah, that is a good point, because the Marlins, like you said, have shifted a ton lately, especially the last couple of years, and the Rays are the king of that. So before we hop off, I'm going to answer just a couple of these questions from Go Knowles. I thought it was amusing. Brian Anderson, John Birdie, and JJ Bleday for Cedric Mullins, who says no. I think the Orioles say no the minute that Kim Ain calls. That's not even that won't even pass on MLB The Show simulation. So that one's done. And then another name that someone mentioned was Cody Bellinger. I don't think either team would be willing to do that, unless Cody Bellinger could play a great center field. He has a cannon of an arm, but coming off that shoulder surgery and coming off the horrendous year he had, no matter what happened in the postseason, I don't think that's a name that Miami wants to take a chance on. I don't know if you guys think differently. Yeah, I'm glad the consensus is there. Well, we're at 4 minutes before 8. The lockout should start in about 4 hours and 4 minutes, unfortunately, unless some last-minute miracle happens. But I think it's inevitable. We all realize that. Last thing anyone needed, owners, players being greedy for the most part. But, hey, that's the way it is. It hasn't happened for a long time in Major League Baseball, so that's a good thing. Hopefully it won't be an extended lockout. But for Eli, for Alex, for Noah, for Daniel, for Hector, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.